celebrating our 20th season. From the college by the lake, meeting the personalities and discussing the issues that affect all of Coeur d'Alene and the inland Northwest. We are the North Idaho College Public Forum. And now, here's your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
We're very pleased to welcome to our program today the superintendent of the Coeur d'Alene School District, Dr. Keith Tolson. Dr. Tolson recently announced that he would be leaving us in June for a position in Alaska, and we certainly want to take this opportunity before he leaves to wish him well and to also discuss public education with him in a general sense as well as in the school district. Dr. Tolson holds an undergraduate degree from Augustine College in South Dakota. He also has a graduate degree from Utah State in the field of communication disorders, and he holds a doctorate from Walden University in long-range planning. Dr. Tolson, we're very pleased to have you, and thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thanks. My pleasure to be here.
I'm also very pleased to have on the panel our two regular panelists. First of all is Janelle Burke, who is an attorney and serves as a law clerk to the head of Judicial District Number 1, the judge of that district. And next to her is Steve Shink, who is Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College. And I shall ask Janelle to commence the questioning.
Well, Superintendent, this is a good time to be taking the health of the district. And so can you tell us, how is the shape of the district at this particular time?
That's a good question, Janelle. I'm a little biased, probably, but my perception is that the district is in excellent shape. If you look at it strictly from a management point of view, the district is in the black. The district has a long-range plan in place that will deal with facilities and programs that we've just spent 10, 11 months with a community developing. We have under construction right now one new elementary school, and that elementary school will be up and running in September of this school year. We have another one that, if the current bond proposal passes, will be up and going in another year. And we have a proposal before the citizens on the proposed new high school. Taking it even further than that, I think we have the fact that our citizens are feeling good about our schools, and we've got excellent staff. That's the key, is really the staff to provide the students the basic education and the specialties that we do provide. So overall, I think we are in excellent shape.
And what are the needs of the district at this particular time?
Well, I can probably give you a list that's a mile long, but my perception is the needs are still primarily to deal with the tremendous growth that we're facing. We have, in the last 2 years, experienced 700 to 800 new students district-wide, and we're especially seeing that pressure in the high school. So we have the needs for continued expansion of staff, if you will, to teach at various grade levels, and the facilities. The high school in particular is one that has kind of bubbled to the surface. We're going to be facing some more growth problems in terms of our middle schools too. So I would say the continued quality, be able to attract quality staff to our district to provide the programs that we want, plus the overcrowding conditions that we're facing, especially at the high school.
For those who are viewers in other states or even in Canada, they may not know that this particular county in Idaho is one of the fastest growing counties, and therefore that would explain why the Coeur d'Alene district would be growing so rapidly.
That's very true, Tony. We've experienced a growth that's just phenomenal, as you folks well know, in the last couple of years, and Kootenai County has been earmarked as one of the fastest growing areas in Idaho, and percentage-wise we have experienced a considerable amount of growth within the district. So we are now approaching 7,500 students within the district, where in the mid-'80s we were below 7,000 in the 6,500 number area. So a tremendous amount of growth, and everybody that's moving into the area does not have children. So we receive a percentage of that. It's usually considered about 30-35% of folks in the area do have children in the school system.
Steve Sheen.
Keith, I'm a little biased toward education too, so I don't want to let this program slip by without giving you an opportunity to talk about the bond election that's ahead. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I'll be happy to, Steve. The bond election that was recently authorized by the Board of Trustees came as a result of the long-range planning of our citizens and staff. That plan in itself has a three-phased approach. We're right now in the first phase of that, and that's the construction of the elementary schools. The second phase is the proposed high school facility, and that's for $16.9 million, and the beginning of the remodeling of the current high school. Third phase would be a proposal to go out with a specific special plant facility levy in several $1,000,000 to help us construct another middle school and do some remodeling on quite a few of our other existing buildings. And the philosophy behind that is that our facilities are an investment that our citizens make, and we want to maintain that investment. If you let that investment deteriorate, you're going to play catch-up in the future, and I think that's some of what we're facing. The $16.9 million bond issue itself is designed for a high school of 12 to 1,500, 1,500 being maximum, 1,200 being the optimum number that we're looking at there. And that's proposed to come online in 1994, which would give us about a year and a half to be able to design that and to be able to construct that. And then a portion of that bond then would go toward the beginning the remodeling of our current high school, which is approaching 20 years old and has received a lot of wear the last 10 years because of the overcrowding conditions that we've had there, the double shifting that we experienced 3, 4, 5 years ago, and the tremendous amount of pressure. And we've gotten a good use out of the facilities that we've spent a minimal amount of dollars on in the mid-'70s. I think it was $3 or $4 million that we were looking at. So we've gotten good use out of that. So really optimistic about that bond issue.
The election is what date?
The election is set for May 5th, and we'll have the polls open 8 to 8, and we'll have quite a few polls around the community for voting. And I'm just optimistic. We need 66 2/3 for that, and I'm predicting over 70% will turn out in support of that, Steve.
And the proposal that the voters are going to see when they step into the booth will be?
The proposal they will see is $16.9 million. That is a not an increase in the current amount of taxes that they are paying now. It'll be less than $2. It'll approach the $1.90, and that's very similar to the level that we are at now. And they will see $16.9 million for a new high school, and then a portion of that $16.9 million, and we don't have an exact figure on that because that will relate to the bidding process, will be used for the beginning of the remodeling of the current high school. And we're hoping that'll be over $500,000 that'll be available for that.
I'd like to move to the national scene and even internationally, because our viewers are from many other places. There's been a lot of discussion at the national level about public education in our country, and when President Bush took office, he talked about certain areas of education. When he appointed the Secretary of Education, Governor Alexander of Tennessee, he had really made some major changes in the education system in that state. Would you share your expertise with us? There's been a lot of criticism of education, and
there has.
There always is of every subject, but what are some of the innovative things that some of the governors and others have proposed, and what's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is that the public is seeing and is hearing, and we've had a lot of studies that have been done. We have the Nations at Risk that was done in the early 80s by Dr. Bell when he was head of the Federal Department of Education. We've had our own studies in Idaho that says the one that was done by the task force, and then also the one that was done privately by a group of folks. We also have our Hispanic task force report. All of those reports, I think, are reflective of what's happening to our nation as a whole, and that is that society has really, really changed. Now, we're all experts in school systems because we've all gone to school and we've all gone through the school system, so a lot of people are experts in that, if you will. And I think that's rightly so, but I think also what's happened, the society problems, a lot of people think that schools can solve that problem, the problems that we have out there. We know that our teen pregnancy rate is very high, that we have high-risk students across our country that are not graduating from schools. We also have our workforce that is changing so drastically, and we know that we are going to be changing jobs 6 and 7 times over the career span that a lot of our students are facing. So as society looks at these problems, they look to ways that we can solve them. My perception that a lot of the proposals that have been made are somewhat a Band-Aid approach to saying, okay, let's raise the attendance requirements, let's make every school look and operate like a business, let's have specific goals and those kinds of things. And I think we're still trying to sort out what is it that we want our schools to do. If you look at the teachers that we have in our school system, a lot of the administrators, a lot of us are products, if you will, of the 50s and 60s. And I think as the values have changed, I think people want to come back to the basics of what our country is all about, and that is that public education is the avenue by which we encourage our citizens to be responsible, to make good decisions, and so forth. So the trends that I see is that it's a movement in the right direction, but it's going to take us a while to get there yet. Education is a large part of Idaho dollars that are spent. Half of our budget approximately comes from the state. So I think the things that you're going to see is that citizens need to become involved in the school system. The site-based decision-making issues are going to be a more part of that, where teachers and administrators and parents all come together and say, this is what we want our schools to do. You can't abdicate your management responsibilities or the fact that we have a board of trustees, but I think pulling that together will help folks in their community identify what they want and what they want their schools to be, because schools have to be changing on a very... So that's a long answer to your question.
But that's perceptive. But I hear you saying that because there's such a change in the workplace, such a major change in the family, that there's been a suggestion by many that the schools take over what a lot of things the family did. Can the schools really do that, or will they fail at their primary mission if they try to take on a lot of responsibility that's carried on by families?
I think you have to be very careful as a school organization about taking on too much. I think the expectation of the public is that, well, what other institution do we have across the country that is more common to every community, every community has a school of one sort or another, and what better way to do it but then, quote, save our nation, if you will, through our schools. I think that can be done if people realize that at the same time, schools cannot do it alone. We have to look back towards the individual family structure, no matter what it is, whether it's a blended family, a single-parent family. The basic needs of that family unit need to be met. And I think schools can partnership with communities and families to do that. But I think if schools if the public has too high expectation of what the schools can do, I would tend to agree with your perception that the schools may fail at if we're doing too many things and not focusing enough narrowly. So we have to be very careful and make sure the community helps identify what that role is.
Janelle Burke.
Well, along that same line, but more on a local level, recently there has been much discussion about the adoption of the Teen Aid program. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what Teen Aid is, and then what position did the administration of the school district take, and was it their recommendation that the Teen Aid program be adopted? How did we come about? How did we get the Teen Aid program?
Teen Aid program is really a curriculum, and we
a
have
curriculum dealing with what?
It has a curriculum to dealing with human sexuality. And it's part of our overall health curriculum. It'll take me 2 days, and I don't think we want to stay that long, but I'll try to give you a short answer to that, is that about 1.5 years ago, our curriculum committee, which is composed of more than 25% citizens and parents, along with our staff, said we need to review what our health curriculum is. So our health curriculum was adopted about a year ago. And that recommendation came through our health committee and up through our what we call our overall guiding committee for health adoption. In the context of that, then, it's necessary, once you do your curriculum and your guidelines, your goals and objectives for that, you also need to develop a text, if you will, that will match that. And so the health committee then reviewed again the curriculums that are out there for that. And the text that they chose for that was Teen Aid. Teen Aid is a formalized curriculum, or a text, if you will, that matches the curriculum. As we went through that then, that came up through the process to the board, and the board adopted that recommendation of the health committee and the overall guiding committee for curriculum, if you will, what we call our staff development curriculum council. Once that was done then, there was the recommendation from the administration, as it was from the health committee, to adopt Teen Aid as the core curriculum and to be able to use supplemental materials and lectures and so forth along. So our students got the big picture on it. Then the board had decided, well, we need to review what those materials are. And the recommendation from the administration was to go with the original, the Teen Aid, along with the supplemental materials and lectures.
That means then that the Teen Aid is an abstinence-based, as I understand.
That is correct.
That's
That
the
is
basic
correct.
underlying. And then the issues became whether there was to be additional materials that would flesh that out, flesh out other areas, or
That's
whether
correct.
it would be limited strictly to abstinence-based materials.
That's correct. I think the community perceived that we were going to do Teen Aid only, and since that stressed abstinence, that's the philosophy behind the whole issue of the human sexuality portion of our curriculum, that a lot of people misperceived that and said, okay, it's going to be Teen Aid only, and there are people that are on the whole gamut of from liberal to conservative, however you wish to define that. And in that context, I think some people misperceived on what the board was saying. And what the board finally arrived at recently was our philosophy is that of abstinence. That's the message that we want to send to our students at whatever level. And that abstinence philosophy, then, we will implement that using Teen Aid as the core text for that, and then we will supplement that in any discussion that does occur with materials that are presented in an abstinence philosophy context. So that doesn't mean that you will not be able to talk about a variety of issues, whatever they may be, but you can.
But so what you're saying is that it would be your position that if a health teacher took materials and went into then means of birth control and so forth, that would be acceptable under your program.
That's the way I understand the board's interpretation, that we don't want to, if you restrict students from having that information available to you, you're not doing the thing that you are responsible for, and that is providing students information so they can make good judgments. So I don't see that being restrictive, but it must be presented in a philosophy of abstinence.
Steve Sheen.
Keith, did the board get involved in that particular curriculum decision because of its potential for controversy, or are they typically involved in decisions of that kind?
Good question, Steve. The board is involved in that on a regular basis. The board adopts all curriculum. The board sets the policy, and as part of that policy procedure, the administration on the management side works through what kind of textbooks, what curriculum that we want that are representative of our communities. And so our recommendation was to go with the Teen Aid. And so the board is involved in math curriculum, it's involved in reading and language arts curriculum, so it's not only Teen Aid. I think the controversy occurred because, one, people misperceived or did not go in and look at the curriculum itself and operated on hearsay, and the board got involved as part of its responsibility, and I think did a very good job overall of listening to the community and making a wise decision. It's not set in concrete. If they need to change later, you always have that opportunity through the curricular process.
You mentioned that the curriculum committee at your school district includes lay people, community
That's
people.
true.
Do you have
Yes.
other communities with that kind of, other committees with that kind of community input?
Yes, we do. We have a very strong basis for one of the policies that we adopted for curriculum was that we will include 25% or more of community members, be they parent or non-parents, within all of our curriculum committees. And we have, I think we counted up here recently, something like 20 or 25 committees going on in our school district, and that's great participation. So just using that as a guideline, yes, there's a great deal of participation by those folks.
Another committee that you've had ongoing for some time, and its work's not done, and of course there's always the issue of cost. but you've had a committee dealing with multicultural programs or cultural diversity, and that's something that's really beginning to be discussed all over the United States, and I would like to get your reaction to this position. Many people have said that we have certainly for a very long time been very thorough in our discussion of history and mathematics and all of those very important disciplines, but that as we become a very diverse society with many cultures and many ethnic, racial groups in our society, that we have not done a good job in education bringing all that together and helping students to understand that. And I want to commend your district for
Thanks.
looking into this issue. But do you think this is a legitimate complaint around the United States that we have really not dealt with that particular subject in any great significance within our curriculum?
I don't think it's a legitimate complaint. I think it's a legitimate issue. And when we say complaint, that doesn't really give it the connotation that I think. I think it needs to be heightened in terms of its place on our national and local agendas. And I say that because I consider our schools and our country as a melding pot. It has been. That's been our strength over many, many years of our history, over 200 years. We're a melting pot, a variety of cultures. And we've built on the strength of those cultures to make our country what it is. And so from that perspective, I say, yes, we need to elevate that agenda and build on the strengths rather than fighting about what is good or bad about a variety of cultures, and really focus on the strength of what our peoples are and what that can bring to our country. So from that perspective, I would say, yes, schools need to do a better job of instructing from that point of view.
You know, it's an exciting thing that's happening, and you sparked another thought in my mind. That is, with some groups that I'm involved with, they're talking about, and we've all used that terminology for a long time, a melting pot, and they're saying they prefer another term now, that a melting pot often indicates that your roots and your culture will disappear into a new one, and they use terms like a stew. Within that stew, we have all the cultures, and maybe that is one of the things that evolves out of a
better
curriculum.
terminology. Yeah, I think definitely. As you know, I'm headed to Alaska in the next couple of weeks, and I think the thing that we need to remember is that all cultures are very important. I know my German culture is very important to me as an individual, and I like to look at the genealogy of my family with the kind of strength that brings. I think we need to keep those identities alive. Alaska has a very diverse layer of culture, and so does Idaho. And I don't want to see us lose that. That's very, very important. And I think schools can play a stronger role. I think we've kind of it's been there, but we've not maybe heightened it to the level of social awareness that we should within our schools. So I would say, yes, there's a lot there to do, and there's a lot in the stew that's really excellent. We should build on that.
Before I return to Janelle, I just have to put a footnote in to say that you and the administration and your whole system has been very supportive of working with your classes dealing with human rights and preparing for Martin Luther King Day in January, and participated in that from its inception 8 years ago, and we commend your district for
We
that.
need to model that, and that's what we're all about. If we don't model it, how can you expect the students to pick it up?
Janelle Bird.
Recently, on the national level, there's been a lot of attention to the fact that SAT scores have been falling. What do you attribute this to, and do you think Coeur d'Alene's typical of that?
Well, Idaho's not typical of that. Our scores in Idaho as a whole, the SAT scores have stayed fairly stable. In fact, I think we're above the national average. So for the dollar spent, I think we're getting a very good product out there. I think it's again, public schools are responsible for all students. We have to provide opportunities for everybody. The SAT scores, the fact that they are falling nationally, may be an indication that we have to do some things differently. And I think we start to do that by examining how we are instructing our students. I think we know that the students that take the SAT are selective students. And students that elect to do that is an individual decision. It's not a decision that we make as a school district. So I think we have to take a look at how we are instructing and move from I think we've moved a long ways from just the lecturing, and move from a hands-on to a hands-on, a participative, a small group, cooperative learning kind of situations that we can improve the scores. And if we don't start improving them, I think then we're responsible. We're accountable for that. And I think we can do that, I think that we have that capability, but we do have to focus. If that's one of our goals, then let's do that.
Steve Sheen.
We're running short of time, so I want to return to an important subject. We've got an election coming up in May.
Yes, we do.
It's important to the district. If people want to help, what should they do?
We are just now forming, in the next couple of weeks, our overall coordinating committee for that. And what folks can do is help share the information and share accurate information. We know that this is a good proposal. We know it's good for Coeur d'Alene. They can contact the school district at 664-8241 and contact the administration or our hotline and leave a message there, or any volunteers can get a hold of our public relations person, Lori Barnes, or contact anybody at one of the schools, and we'll find something for them to do. And I think the word to get out is that this is good for kids. Bottom line, it's good for kids. It's a community responsibility, not my responsibility. And if the community will get behind this, like they have our human rights issues, like they have with helping make Coeur d'Alene an all-American city, those are the kind of things they do. And get out and vote. That's a responsibility that we have, not just for bond issues, but for the upcoming primary elections and so forth. So I guess that's the best thing that I could advocate, Steve.
Dr. Tolson, you have certainly been very cooperative to take our questions and look toward the future. For young people who are in our school system today in this country, what would be some advice you would give them with such a changing society we live in? What are some of the things that you would urge them to elect to take in their upper division work in high school and preparing for college, if that's their path?
That's really a broad question. I guess I would encourage them to consider being teachers, first thing. Being a teacher myself, I think that's something that we do need, is a very strong core of teachers for our educational system, because that's what makes America great. I would encourage folks to look at their basic core, to stay with their math, their sciences, and those kinds, whether it's on an applied side or whether it's on the very theoretical side. I would encourage them to look at the idea of you are responsible for the decisions that you make. Listen to what your folks around you are saying and assimilate that information, and develop a lifelong interest in learning and in education, because no matter what you do as a student, you are going to be changing careers, as I mentioned previously, any number of times, 5, 6, 7 times over your span of your work career. So I'd encourage you to develop an interest in lifelong learning would probably be the bottom line.
On that note, we have to bring the program to conclusion. On behalf of the panel and our staff, Dr. Tolson, thank you for coming. It's been most informative,
welcome.
And we wish you well in your new endeavors.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, our guest has been Dr. Keith Tolson, the superintendent of the Coeur d'Alene School District, and we would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time, when we shall discuss what we believe to be a very important topic. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Telemedia Services on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.